Hey, all you beautiful Ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplace can fix our world, I got a real treat for you today. I got the one and only Jamie Browne. How's it going, Jamie?
All good. Thank you, Nick.
All right. So let's drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. Let's get going here. 2026 is our year. It's time for us to really elevate our profession, elevate our careers. That starts with elevating our mindset. So we're going to be talking today about compliance careers, how to build or join the right compliance team. We got a lot of insights from Jamie. He runs Leonid Group, and they are GRC hiring and recruitment specialists. So drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from today. And we're trying to break some more records. Last year, we broke a bunch of records on the Ethicsverse, and we're going to do more of that. So in 2026, we got accredited. So your CEUs are going to be coming a lot faster. So whether you're with HRCI, if you're with SHRM or the Compliance Certification Board, those are going to be coming lickety split. So round of applause for Joa for arm wrestling CCB into accreditation status for Ethico. We are giving away books. You know, I love giving away books. We're giving away some copies of, so you know, our good friend Hema Lomax and Ashley Durbin, they put together this book about the art of culture building. And now they have 3 in the series. They got a full trilogy going here. So if you have not picked this up, well, then you're in the right place because you might win one today. And if you don't feel like typing in the chat and dropping emojis and all that kind of stuff, all good. Go over to Amazon and pick these up. I think these are still free if you do that Kindle membership. But these books are absolutely phenomenal. The new editions, you know, the first one was the the Art of Ideation. The second one is the Art of Implementation, and finally the Art of Celebration. These are packed full of great tips and techniques and frameworks that you can use to drive more influence in the organization. You know, with all this AI talk and all this software talk going on around right now at this time where there's so much change in our organization, sometimes we can lose sight of the fact that this is a human's business. This is, you can't do your job without the engagement of the human sensors within your organization. And these books are absolutely phenomenal. These got the seal of approval. We're up to 1,000 emojis, amazing. I'm only 2 minutes into this thing. Let's try to break a record on that front today as well. We have our year in review. So if you have not checked out the Ethico year in review, click that link on the console right now. It should be right below our beautiful smiling faces. And you can see all the stuff that we put out last year. So we have made our reputation in this space by providing a lot of value. That's what we really want to do. We're at this interesting inflection point in the life cycle of our industry, where the next 10 years can look a lot different from the last 10 years, but it's going to take us doing things in a bit of a different way. And so we put together a bunch of toolkits over the last 12 months in 2025 that I encourage you to check out. Pull something from those things. Those, of course, are all free for all my Ethic cuties. Pull some of those things and start doing things a little bit different this year. Now is the time for experimentation. Now is the time for us to really let our tires of traction gain better purchase inside our organization and really drive our influence forward and drive our profession forward. But it's on you, okay? So let's grow our network as well. You know, our LinkedIn. Drop those LinkedIn URLs in the chat because our network is our net worth. None of us have a big enough net worth. None of us have a big enough network. This industry is totally full of people that are willing to help, willing to jump in. So stay active in the chat, win yourself a book, and connect with at least one person today and expand that network. Who knows? You might meet them in real life at a conference. MySim is our platform, our risk brain, the case management system that our company has been built upon, and we continue to innovate and try to drive this tool forward. So we've made a bunch of enhancements this year. We have new hierarchical categories, so your reporting can be even better, so you can gain better insights. We have a new enhanced reporting engine, so all those reports that you want can be spit directly out of the system. You don't even have to go in there. They can show up in your email. The exact data set you need to drive your board reporting can be constructed in real time. And we have a new workflow engine that allows for faster investigations. We are helping folks cut out about half of their time on their investigations with better information that's gathered on the front end, with better workflows, better automations, in a more usable system. And this auto-assigning investigators and our approvals workflow are doing a lot to help accelerate that more. So if you have not checked out the Ethico system, if you're in a current tool and you want to see what else is out there, or all the love is lost and you're sick of being in a tool that there's been no investment in, the tech debt is, too high, might be time to make a change. So book a demo today and see what we got to offer. Next speaking of what we got to offer next Tuesday, we're going to be having a no pitch zone session where we're going to be showing a lot of the innovations that have come out in our software. It'll give you a chance to ask questions. It'll give you a chance in real time to see what's going on. So go ahead and save your spot. That's going to be next Tuesday. And then next Thursday, we got the one and only Matt Kelly coming, and we are talking about a retaliation survival guide. This is going to be a massive event. So if retaliation is a problem in your organization, it absolutely is. If you want to try to stamp that out inside of your organization to gain more participation from the human sensors in your company, well, this is going to be the place to be next Tuesday at noon Eastern. All right, Leonid Group. The one and only Jamie Browne is here. Leonid Group, these are the leaders in GRC recruiting. He has a ton of insights on how the market has changed, what folks are looking for, and what skills you need to build in order to really elevate your career, whether it's in the company that you're at or if it's in the next lily pad you're going to be hopping to. They put together a really cool guide that should be on the console right now. But Jamie, welcome. Let's get a massive emoji explosion for Jamie. We're up to 1700. I love it. Tell us a little bit about this resource, and we'll dive into the conversation here, buddy.
Yeah, so the resource is out. So we release annual hiring guides across the specialisms that we recruit. And what we want to be able to give is a flavor of what are the trends we're seeing globally within the ethics and compliance space, or risk or legal, across the areas that we do. So I think in this most recent one that was 2025, we looked at over 15 countries and broken down what are we seeing from a hiring perspective within ethics and compliance in that country, as well as some salary information for each of those countries. We are currently working hard on the 2026 editions, which will be coming in the next couple of months.
Phenomenal. So download that thing, use that to get yourself a raise. That's going to be right there for you. And you can just cite the Leonid Group, and your boss is going to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're underpaid. Here you go. Get that quick raise for you. All right. So today we're going to be talking about a lot. We're going to be talking about, how the market has changed. It's fundamentally shifted. It's moved from sort of specializing, this demand for our specialized skills is kind of outpacing some of the supply in the market space right now. And so we're going to be talking about what are those skills that we need to enhance? What are those skills that the market is trying to prioritize from a technical and leadership perspective? We're going to understand what value add that JD brings versus a more diverse sort of professional experience. 10, 15 years ago, you had to have a JD. Today, there's a lot more diversity and a lot more open-mindedness, because I think there's a clearer picture around what it takes for a compliance department to really be the function that it's supposed to be inside the organization, that sort of specialized risk function that helps build that sustainable culture of integrity and really drive that bottom line forward, and allows the business to more sustainably achieve its business results. So I want to start out, Jamie, talking about what today's corporate talent market looks like. What makes the current compliance market different or challenging compared to where it was 3 years ago? And what are some of the skills, the specialized skills that you're seeing over and over again that end up kind of commanding a premium in the space?
Well, I think I'd firstly start by, I know there's been a lot of talk, especially last year, around FCPA and how important is compliance. I want to just reassure everyone that hiring is still going strong in this space. I mean, last year we were tracking 40% uptick in compliance searches as opposed to the year before. So companies have continued to hire in this space, and 50% of that for us was US. So I think it's important to state that from the outset. Where the challenge is when hiring at the moment in this space is compliance become ever more complex. So whether that's ESG, sanctions, data privacy, anti-bribery, trade compliance, AI, and companies are trying to keep up with that and needing to continue strengthening their teams in this space. So more companies are going after the same pool of finite candidates, which is creating and has created over the last couple of years a bottleneck in the industry. So that's, I'd say, the primary challenge right now is that the supply doesn't meet demand within compliance.
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk, though, that I hear of, oh, no one's hiring compliance. People aren't expanding their programs. And, we kind of live the life that we fixate on, right? Like whatever we're fixating on, whatever story we're telling ourselves is what we're going to kind of see over and over again. It's like when you buy a new car, you buy a new red car, and then you start seeing all these red cars around and you're like, look at all these people trying to copy me. That is like a very human thing. That's a cognitive error that all of us are kind of wired with. And so I think it's important to hear that message that you just said, that this market is ripe. People are trying to expand their compliance programs because the risk and regulatory complexity continues to increase, and organizations need to be able to run down that path a lot faster. One more time, I just want to say, drop your questions in the chat. We have the one and only Jamie Browne. This guy is like a good get here, okay? It's hard to get this guy on the hook. So if you have questions, I'll try to work those in as we are, chatting here. But okay, so beyond these sort of, technical compliance competencies, what are you seeing? More soft capabilities separate candidates who thrive or who are, picked up quicker? And if so, what are some of those softer things that you're seeing really kind of separate beyond those sort of core, technical capabilities that organizations are looking for?
It's something you touched on already, actually, is, 10 to 15 years ago, compliance was seen very much through a legal lens and the JD prerequisite for the role. However, over that time now, I mean, if you look at what chief compliance officer needs to be in today's environment, they need to be a linchpin in the organization. They need to, and I want a better analogy than this, but a kind of octopus and its tentacles throughout the company. Ability to speak different languages to different stakeholders, to different functions. That is a primary skill. So rather than being seen as a sort of legal and compliance advisory function separate from the business, compliance now is almost the bridge between legal and regulations and the actual business. So the ability for a compliance leader to build trust, build relationships, that's key when it comes to soft skills, as opposed to purely the legal and technical knowledge.
So again, I mean, that technical knowledge is obviously important, but it sounds like what you're saying is a deeper sort of business acumen, an ability to sort of talk across the table to people in different departments, understand the sort of context of the business, and connect our initiatives, which matter obviously to us, to the initiatives of the business or to the objectives of the organization, really can separate kind of a mediocre candidate from a great candidate.
Like you said, it's a given that you need to have the technical know-how, but it's the ability to package that in a way that is understandable to the business. A compliance function nowadays isn't just the police force of the company or a box ticking department. It has to be a real partner to the business. And I think a leader that can drive that in the organization, in the compliance function, that's the skill set that's standing out at the moment.
I've always thought about the compliance department as this sort of circulatory system. But I like your kind of squid analogy, the Kraken, we have to really kind of run those tentacles throughout the organization. How would you advise somebody that you're helping through a recruitment process demonstrate that? Because I think sometimes, some of those softer skills are a little bit harder to demonstrate on a resume. What are some strategies to be able to show that or package it, as you said, in an interview or as you're interacting with people? Is it a line of questions that you can ask in order to demonstrate that you have that kind of perspective and you have that kind of a lens? Is it proof points from historical, silo walls that someone was able to knock down? How would you advise somebody to really kind of demonstrate that, that softer piece of the puzzle that is really critical to, long-term success in this kind of a role?
It's really difficult to get across the sort of soft skills of a person. You can't really write that on a resume. You can really get across your technical knowledge and know-how, but that part is difficult. When in an interview setting, I always say that compliance career is a series of projects. It's a series of program builds or upgrades or transformations. And when interacting with a potential employer, you want to talk about how the program was when you started, when you joined, and how it was when you left. And then you can't talk about that journey without talking about the relationships that you have to build in the organization to get buy-in from the business to make the changes that you need to do. So the topic of the transformation that the program went on and discussing that will naturally lead to the soft skills that you were required to make those changes.
That's a great answer. I think it's like, kind of sharing a philosophy on how work gets done in a compliance function will ultimately naturally lead to a description, at least, if not specific proof points, a description at least of how you had to work with other folks in the organization and the importance of connecting what compliance is doing to the idiosyncratic goals of Department X or the broader sort of goals of the organization. We got a lot of A lot of questions coming in. I'm going to start firing some of these off at you. Julie has a great question. Thanks for this question, Julie. Have you seen a hiring surge / decline in certain industries? If so, where? And what would you attribute those things to?
So maybe unsurprisingly, where companies have been looking to strengthen their governance functions in the US, but also across Europe, aerospace and defense has been our biggest growth sector, especially in Europe over the last 18 months. Pharmaceuticals continues to hire as well. With regards to decline, in at least in our data, we haven't seen a significant drop. We have looked at the industries that we worked across, and they are pretty equally split. So whether that's energy, manufacturing, chemicals, like I said, pharmaceutical and aerospace and defense, we're not as sort of tapped into the banking and financial services side. That I would say is a bit separate from us. But across the industries where we've seen growth, the biggest two have been in the US and Europe, aerospace and defense, as well as pharmaceuticals.
So you've seen a couple of pockets of surge, but you haven't seen any significant decline. So I'm going to be kind of saying this throughout the presentation. So mute me when you see my hands moving, because that means I'm talking if you don't like to hear this. But, a lot of us are sort of trained and naturally wired to be this like worst case scenario thinkers, right? We have to think about how things might go wrong. And sometimes that gives us a bit of a bias for like negative thinking, this sort of negativity bias. And I have seen, and you've just kind of corroborated it, that like this profession is not going away anytime soon. Mm-hmm. The organizations throughout the economy in all these different industries, they're going to continue to need our expertise. And so we have to be very careful about the stories that we're telling ourselves, because like none of us are stuck. Everybody who's on this call, they have a very unique skill set. They have a unique toolbox that they have accumulated a bunch of tools and a bunch of perspectives and frameworks over the years, and all the experiences that they've had that can really translate to a lot of different scenarios. So this is not like a dying industry by any means. A year ago, there were, we got a new president. I don't know if you heard about that, but there were all these executive orders coming out, and people were really worried about FCPA going away and compliance going away and so forth. And like that ended up being, a nothing burger, first of all. And second of all, here we are a year later, and this industry continues to grow. Your relative, perhaps, Melanie Brown asked this question. Thanks for this question, Melanie. Supply doesn't meet demand. Does that mean that compliance professionals in the market don't have the specialized skill sets? I imagine that she's asking that in the context of those who might be struggling to find a new position. There's all this demand. The supply isn't happening. People are spending too long trying to find, taking too long to like try to find a job. Is that a skill set gap, do you think? Or is that an interview sort of capability gap?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a skill set gap in compliance professionals. It's more that the companies are trying to compete with each other for this talent. So it's not to do with candidates not being qualified enough. It's more to do with the companies trying to make themselves stand out in the market and attract the right type of person for their firm. So yeah, of course, look, there are new areas of compliance at the moment, and people need to keep their finger on the pulse when it comes to that. But that isn't what I'm saying is the challenge in the market right now. Now, there is a bigger discussion to be had, and I'm not sure it's here, but around the frustrations that candidates and hiring managers feel with the job market and the kind of black box effect of applying for positions. And that I completely appreciate can be frustrating. But when it comes to the actual skill set of what companies need right now, the supply is there. It's just that there's not enough of that supply to match the companies out there that need this skill.
And I think, to that point, that sort of black box sort of recruiting or recruiter frustration, that's not sort of compliance specific. You know what I'm saying? Like that's across the board, right? Like whether any industry, if you're looking for a job, this new advent of this new technology, this sort of black box effect, the ability for AI to generate resumes and the ability for AI to scan those AI generated resumes and all that stuff, that creates a lot of sort of dead weight loss, I think, in the hiring process on both sides of the fence. And so again, a lot of this conversation today, I think, is going to kind of boil down to a mindset thing as we learn about your insights that we can't tell ourselves that story if we've been out of a job for X amount of time that like, oh, the market stinks. It's a new challenge that everybody is facing across the sort of spectrum of recruiters.
On both sides of the company looking to hire and the candidates out there, yeah, there are frustrations right now.
So Lori has a question. Thanks for this, Lori. Is there a comprehensive list of headhunters for compliance professionals? Yeah. Jamie Browne. That's the list. No, I'm kidding. If you guys have a list, go ahead and drop that in there. But do you recommend, and sorry to put you on the spot, but I guess we're just getting going here. Like, is it helpful for someone who's maybe in between positions to reach out to recruiters such as yourselves and get on their radar? Or is that kind of a no-no?
Look, I mean, yes. Ultimately, compliance is a small, if we're looking at compliance, it's a small world. I'm always looking to connect to people within that space. And typically how we work as a company is we're not reliant on advert response. If we're trying to find someone for an open position, what a lot of the time we're doing is going to our network, our existing people that we've been recommended to through word of mouth. And a lot of the time I'm having conversations with those people to understand what they're looking for as a next step, whether that's because they're in between jobs right now or they're reaching the end of a project in their current role looking for something new. And then once I've had that conversation, or one of my teams had that conversation, then that person's on our radar. And as soon as a new role comes up that matches what they told me that they're looking for, rather than them needing to scour our job board, we will come to them about the role. Right. So I'd rather have an initial open conversation to understand more about each other and go from there.
I mean, that's a classic win-win, right? If it's easy for you to fill a role, that's great for you and for your business. But again, it's going to take kind of us grabbing that steering wheel of our careers and getting on the radars of folks like you. So Victoria has a question that I want to kind of dovetail into this next question here. Thanks for this, Victoria. She said, are there particular certifications that companies are looking for? And so I want to kind of ask that along with, that question. And then also, like, if you're trying to transition from middle manager to leadership, are there certifications? Are there certain experiences or capabilities that create the biggest gaps that like prevent that advancement? Is it just kind of cross your fingers and you get that battlefield promotion? You know what I'm saying? Or are there certain things that we can be doing to kind of build that resume to make someone feel comfortable kind of taking a bet, taking a flyer on us as like a new, in a new role that maybe we haven't done before?
So with regards to certifications, what I always say when answering this to candidates or people in the space is, if it's a topic that you enjoy, you'd like to learn more about it, and you want to put that time in, do it. It won't hurt at all your application process on any application process. But I wouldn't necessarily say it will be the deal breaker to get you that new role. If there were two identical candidates and both candidates had identical backgrounds and one had a certain qualification and the other one didn't, it could be the tipping factor, but that scenario is extremely unlikely. However, if it's a topic you're interested in, you want to get exposure to it, and the certification allows you to do that, then I'd recommend doing it. But I wouldn't want to promise it being the clincher.
Well, I'm looking for promises here, Jamie. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, if we're interested in it, then we should be kind of pursuing those things, but we shouldn't count on achieving this thing being a sort of, baseline sort of qualification criterion for the selection process, at least in your view.
My advice to clients will be always to focus on what hands-on experience does this person have, what can they bring to the table, and what previous projects and work have they had that relates to what you need, as opposed to this qualification or this qualification. It could be a nice additional thing to have, like a cherry on the cake, but it won't be the substance of what I'm doing, what I'm pointing out when recommending a candidate to a client.
Yeah, I mean, hiring and trying to find a new job and trying to like elevate your career, it's not like a paint by numbers type of an exercise. There's no real recipe to follow. It can be very difficult, and it can be very, very frustrating. A lot of people feel like they're kind of beating their head against the wall. They're sending out resumes and they're not gaining that kind of traction. So Karen has a good question here. Are companies being, in your opinion, too restrictive with requirements for hiring, even those candidates that show positive growth potential into a compliance role? Have you seen some of that? Have you seen some of that kind of frustration from candidates that you've worked to place where they're like, my gosh, like they're so restrictive. They're looking for this one thing that, like, in the context of a compliance program, that doesn't really matter that much,
I've seen it where expectations are too high. They're looking for the unicorn candidate that has 10 years of experience across every area of regulatory compliance. That's not out there. So, when we're working with a client, I really want to drill down into what is the absolute must-have what is the purpose of this role? Why are you hiring, and what will you need to make sure you're successful in that? And then what's the nice to have? Okay, if we find this, then perfect. It will add to the candidate, but I need to really differentiate between that. There's too many processes out there where they're trying to tick every single box, and that isn't realistic. And you need some flexibility on that front.
So I'm just curious, when you're dealing with a client that you're helping to fill a role for, how often does that conversation end up influencing what they're looking for? Like, do you feel like you're able to kind of move the walls of the house, so to speak? And do you feel that many times they're looking for something where they kind of don't know what they need? Because I mean, that's like a pretty common problem. Like, no offense to anyone, wink, wink. But sometimes if it's HR, they might not know all the nuance of compliance, and they might chat GPT a job description without knowing what actually matters and what doesn't matter. Like, do you see that a lot? And do you feel like you're able to kind of influence that, that requisition or something?
Yes. I mean, my goal is to be a partner to the company, a consultative, collaborative partner that can tell them the good things and the bad things about what they're trying to do. And there's no point we don't want to overpromise and under-deliver. We will only say yes to searches that we're 100% confident that we can deliver on. If we think that there's something wrong with whether it's the job description, whether it's the compensation, whether it's the location, whatever it may be, we'd rather tell them then, get them to see if they can amend the issues and then come to us, because then I can confidently deliver for it. The challenge sometimes with us initially over the years is that companies will come to us right at the end of the process. They've looked at their team, they've assessed the team, they've then gone through an approval process to get a hire. They then design a job description and get budget approved, and then they come to us. And by that point, we may have to tell them, well, actually, I wouldn't have done that. I think you need to change it here. So one thing we've launched recently is we call it Talent Intelligence, our consulting arm, where we can work with companies much earlier in the process and be able to assess their current team, look at compensation, benchmark against competitors in the industry, give them really honest advice as to what's realistic in the market. We also, for topics like organizational design, we partner with a close friend of mine, Andrew McBride, and his company, Integrity Bridge, which I know a lot of you here know. So we'd rather be involved earlier in the process and help them go to market in the right way, rather than come to us and we then need to kind of unpick this and unpick that to make sure it's realistic for what's out there.
Yeah, I mean, they might get budget approval that's only 60 or 70% of what it's going to be necessary to get that person and get that job done. So the sooner the better. What's your perspective on like the importance of specialization, whether that's industry specialization or, obviously there's 30 things within compliance. How important is that specialization? And at what point in someone's career should they kind of make the decision, if it's even a valid decision, between being a generalist that maybe has sort of a stronger sort of general business acumen, project management, that kind of thing, versus someone who's like just a mainline expert in, let's say, trade compliance or something like that? How would you tell someone to start thinking about that as they're looking kind of down the road on where their career might go?
So a couple of answers here, I guess. One is quite a simple one, sort of the 80-20 rule. So I usually say that the more senior positions where it's more about stakeholder management and leadership skills, I would probably say about 80% of that, the role is about that important skill set, and 20% then is the niche specialization. Now, of course, as we discussed earlier, you always need to have the technical know-how, but it's more about being able to manage people with that subject matter expertise. I'd say earlier in the career, more junior positions, it's the other way. It's probably more 80% needing to specialize in these topics and 20% of that leadership. And I think that's split initially, and then there's kind of a balance as you go up in mid-level where you will be a bit more evenly split.
Very interesting. Here's a great question from our good friend Divya. When you're interviewing for a new compliance role, what is the one hidden question you ask the hiring manager to determine if the organization actually values ethics, or they are just looking for a check the box figurehead? This is a big one, right? Like, I've heard so many stories of someone being like, yeah, everything felt great, and then I got in there and I was really just a barnacle on the ship, or they kind of said some of the right things, or their website looked great, or their code of conduct had, all those favorite words we like, integrity and honesty and all those kinds of things. And I got in there and it was really just a bunch of platitudes and just like a bunch of lip service. How would you advise somebody to really kind of see through the see through the smoke or kind of read between the lines and really get a higher sort of confidence interval around the extent to which that organization actually cares about ethics and compliance and views it as the strategic lever that it can be, you know?
So I'd love to say there's one perfect question that uncovers that immediately. Unfortunately not, but there are ways to delve into it. So, I mean, compensation, firstly, that's always a starting point. I say to clients that how you compensate these roles reflects how you prioritize compliance. If you're telling me that you're looking for a head of compliance, but what you're actually paying for is a compliance specialist or manager, that discrepancy will immediately be clear. I would also say that even if they are paying competitively for the role that you're hiring for, you want to understand more around okay, but what budget allocation will I have when I join? Is there going to be an additional headcount that I can bring in? You know, what is the tech stack that you have? You know, how is compliance spoken about in the organization? You know, when I would ask the hiring manager, what is your relationship like with whether it's the CFO, the general counsel, or other senior stakeholders? How do you feel that compliance is seen in the organization? I'd probably want to understand more around other hires they may have made in the team. What sort of backgrounds do they have, and what impact would you say that person's had since they joined? So you're trying to get a bit more into the culture of the company as opposed to just tell me about the technical aspects of what you're looking for. Hopefully that at least gives a start.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you're kind of looking for some of those context clues. And I think another good strategy is to talk to people who maybe used to work at that organization. You could talk to them offline or something like that and just really get a sense of it, because no one's advertising the fact that the CEO is a charlatan. You know what I mean?
No.
Are there things that you, yeah, that's built in, right? Are there things that you see in a job description, or are there things, you know, this is kind of like a dovetail off of Divya's question, but like, are there things in a job description that you see, or things that you would tell someone who's looking for another job to look for in that job description that tell you that are kind of red flag things, you know, that kind of signal that the organization doesn't understand the function, or they're not really serious about resourcing it properly? Because I mean, some of those questions you asked, those are great questions. And maybe the answer is like the body language that you see, because I just have never met anyone who says, yeah, we don't really care about integrity here. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easy to say the right things in the context of that interview. But what are some of the red flags that you see on paper? What are some of the red flags that you would kind of see in an interview where that candidate is asking that new company, you know, a series of questions that could kind of tip them off that maybe this isn't what it's all cracked up to be, you know?
So I think there can be simple things like just looking at the job description, looking at the title, the job title, and just seeing that it's very generic. It's been, as you mentioned earlier, Nick, it's either been a ChatGPT compliance officer job description. There's no real thought or nuance in it. I think that's
you see an M dash, that's a red flag, okay?
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it is simple solutions like that I'm not saying then you rule it out entirely. It's not for me, but I would start to then be thinking about it as we go into an interview process. If there's no mention in the job description around the scope of the role, the team that comes with it, if there's no real mention about the tone from the top or executive sponsorship, I think that again should start asking questions. I think as well, as I mentioned, if there's that misalignment between the scope of the role, if it's, you know, it sounds like it's a head of compliance position, but then they're looking for someone with 4 or 5 years of experience. Again, there's a gap there. There's only so much someone with 4 years of experience can do as a head of compliance to influence board level or senior stakeholders in the organization. So discrepancies like that stand out, I think, as well. I mean, look, there's so much you can get into in this. I think it's going through the interview process and not being afraid to ask questions. It should be a 50-50 conversation. It should be a two-way street. And as much about whether they're the right fit for you as whether you're the right fit for them.
That should have gotten 10,000 emoji reactions, because that is like perhaps the biggest piece of feedback and the biggest sort of piece of advice that I think we should all like take to heart. Like, the key's got to fit in the lock. Like, you're not just sort of like trying to get a job. I mean, we have a unique skill set, and like the grass is not always greener. It's just grass. You know what I'm saying? So we have to really find that right place. And friends of mine who have found the perfect position for them they did exactly what you said. Like, they asked a lot of questions, and they were really trying to validate, like, is this place going to be the type of place that's going to value my skill set? Because my perhaps philosophy, what I'm trying to do, the type of program I'm trying to build, I know that not every organization wants that. Some organizations naturally want to check the box thing. Others are going to see some value in it. And I think having that sort of like pride in yourself and belief in the sort of reaping and sowing rule of the universe, that we have to kind of like, I don't know, you don't marry the first person that you meet, right? Well, I did. But not everyone does.
Exception that proves the rule.
You see, exactly. But I'm just saying, like, it has to be right. It has to work, and it has to work for you. Like, nobody knows yourself more than you. And I think getting a clear picture of what your strengths and your weaknesses are, what your vision for impact is going to be, is going to allow you naturally to, if you have that same if you have the kind of confidence I'm talking about, it's going to naturally allow you to ask those questions and make it a two-way street interview. Like, I just always tell people, like, if you're not asking a ton of questions in your interview, that's a red flag to the interviewer. I mean, it's a red flag to me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it shows a level of desperation, and it shows, again, me sitting on the other side of the table, like trying to hire somebody. If they're not thinking about how this place might fit into their skill set or their vision for the role, that kind of turns into a bit of a red flag. If, on the other hand, somebody's asking a ton of questions, I can see that there's a high level of intentionality. The odds, and again, maybe I'm reading the room wrong, the odds of them having multiple options is probably higher, and the thoughtfulness that they're bringing to the role to make sure that their key is going to fit in the lock here is a much different kind of. It's just a much different posture that I think commands a lot more strength and conveys a lot more strength in the interview process.
I agree with all of that. It's it has to be a fit both ways. Otherwise, it will be a short-term fix until you find the right role.
So, taking like compensation out of it, I'm sure you have some stories like this, but like, are there some companies that really struggle to attract top candidates even though their compensation is dialed in? And if so, like, what are some of those factors that end up creating barriers for them getting the talent that they're looking for? These might be hints for us to kind of look for as we're looking for, new jobs and new positions.
Look, I mean, of course, money and compensation is important, but it's not everything. We've been tracking sort of what motivates candidates when they're looking for new roles. Now, salary and benefits is always number one, but especially since COVID, close behind that now is flexible work arrangements, the work-life balance, it's opportunities for career growth, and it's job security. They're the sort of 5 main motivators. So even if you're paying market rate, but you're not ticking any of those other boxes, it's not going to guarantee you're going to get the right candidate. I think another important fact, and something I'm always trying to say to clients as well, is keep an open mind with the impact of having hybrid work as opposed to on-site will open up the pool of candidates drastically. So if I have a client that tells me they want someone on site 4 days a week, let's say it's a Chicago-based client, if they tell me 4 days a week, I will literally draw a circle around their headquarters of people that I think, of a distance I think people would be willing to travel to 4 days a week. Now, if I manage to get them to change that to 3 days, I can redraw that circle, expand the radius, and find people that would be willing to travel that little bit further to do that 3 days rather than 4. So it opens up the pool of candidates. It's not just about offering flexibility, but also widening the candidate pool. So sometimes it can be simple fixes like that will make an impact on the hiring.
Interesting. So from your perspective, I mean, you kind of answered this a little bit of a different way, but Natalia has a question here that says, what do you think is more preferable, experience or a perfect degree / certification without experience? From your standpoint, what ends up having a higher hit rate as you're trying to, fill a position or as you're kind of pushing candidates through? Because you probably have some inkling on like the success, the odds of success for candidate A versus candidate B, given their background, experience, resume, all that stuff.
Look, I mean, typically we'll only put forward candidates that we believe on paper and from the conversation we've had are right for the role. So let's say we put 4 or 5 candidates across to a client. We're confident that their experience matches what their client's looking for. It then comes down to the personality fit, the sort of cultural fit, and that's harder for us to predict. So it isn't that we could probably rank the candidates we're putting in order of who we think will get the job. It's going to be down to, as we mentioned, the fit. Does the key fit in the lock, and which key fits in which lock? Now, with regards to the question from Natalia, it's the experience for us typically that's of higher priority. It's what hands-on experience they have that the candidate can bring to the table. That might be because the types of positions that we have are not typically entry level. They're usually can be specialist, manager, all the way up. And by that point, it's going to be what have you done previously, and what can you bring to the table for us here? And then, of course, certifications and degrees support that, but it'll be the experience first.
I want to kind of tag on to what you just said here. We have a really unique opportunity in the space of compliance because it is that circulatory system, because it takes such this myriad sort of bouquet of skills to be really successful in it. We have this opportunity to frame experiences that we have had in other roles that maybe are outside compliance to show that kind of overlap. So like a great compliance program, it takes marketing, it takes sales, it takes influence, it takes project management, it takes detail orientation, it takes conscientiousness, it takes all of these different things, this ability to build bridges as we were talking about. And so I just want to try to motivate and inspire people who are on this, who feel like, man, I just don't have like a ton of compliance, expertise and a ton of, compliance like experience. You probably have a whole bunch of other experiences, even if it's getting your kids to make your bed. Okay, that's compliance, right? Like there's hundreds of different like experiences that you've had that you should feel equipped to bring into the conversation and use as sort of data points to validate the position or the perspective that you have. I think when someone is sitting across the table from a candidate, they're trying to kind of see through, is this person just saying this stuff? These claims that they're making, are they real? Is this going to be a high value bet? Can I get a high level of confidence? And to the extent that it's important that compliance folks are, true trusted advisors in the organization, that means that they have to have a position, they have to have a perspective. And I think when we can come to these kinds of conversations with a perspective and say, hey, there's going to be a ton of project management in this. Every day is different in compliance. I have to be able to, think on my feet and pivot quickly. Well, if I have an experience outside of compliance that I've been able to demonstrate that and build that kind of a muscle, like there's a lot of track stars that make their way into football, real football, okay, not soccer. They make their way into football because so many of those muscles are the same.
They leave the chat.
Did I just ruin it? Did I just derail this whole thing?
Yeah, we were doing so well, Nick. We were doing so well.
But I'm just saying, like, muscles that are built in other sports translate into, other sports. And so we need to look for those experiences to like be able to like demonstrate those. And those are absolutely valid in my mind. Those are valid talk tracks, in the space, even if you lack sort of mainline sort of compliance expertise or experience.
Just add to that. I mean, I always recommend to clients, and especially when we're doing the consulting work with talent intelligence, it's okay, of course, bring in some external expertise that will have the ethics and compliance experience, but don't have a team fully of people that you've only brought in externally. Look at your organization. Who can you rotate into the compliance function that can bring a certain perspective from the business into the function? So it should be a mix of both internal people that have come from other departments, like you mentioned, that can bring excellent experience into the compliance function and do things in different ways and see things in different ways, as well as, of course, going to the market to bring in some external people that can bring fresh ideas about how things are done in other companies. But it needs to be a mix of both.
I was talking to a team yesterday, and they added somebody on their team from procurement. And on the surface, I was like, "What's the point of that?" And then as I thought through it, well, it's like, well, there's a ton of detail orientation in that role. There's a ton of project management. There's a ton of follow up and follow through that's necessary. That lends itself perfectly for that sort of mid-level sort of compliance role, right? A ton of communication skills. A ton of what's that?
Especially getting involved with third-party risk management and supply chain due diligence, and if they've got their finger on the pulse as to the suppliers of the company, that's not a bad thing.
So you have a ton of experience in the space. You've placed hundreds and hundreds of people, and you've been doing this for a while. Are you seeing some loosening up of the sort of JD, lawyer requirement for these positions? And it sounds like you're starting to see a little bit more of a open-mindedness about diverse backgrounds, can fill sort of roles in compliance. So if that's true, I'd love you to talk about that a little bit. And I'd also like you to talk about it from the context of like, who's driving that change? Is it people within the compliance department that are seeing like, okay, I need to kind of assemble an Avengers team of people with different sort of superpowers? Or is it coming from like, legal or someone kind of above and outside of the compliance department whose eyes are opening to the diversity that's really necessary for this function to like be as effective as it could be?
if I ever want to get a debate going on LinkedIn, it'll be how important is a JD in compliance. That is still the topic that everyone's talking about. And I'd love to say that all companies now are willing to consider candidates from all backgrounds, regardless of whether they have a JD or not. But there are still companies out there that are JD or nothing when it comes to compliance. Now, when I'm speaking to those companies, I'm very much telling them that the perfect candidate that can come in and do the job that they need could be from another background, and it could easily be from another background. So my advice is always to consider, again, going back to what I said earlier, what hands-on compliance experience does this person have as opposed to the accreditation or degree that they have. However, sometimes companies will listen to that, other times they won't. With regards to where this is coming from, I think, as I mentioned earlier, if we're 15 years ago and we're very much looking at FCPA, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, lawyers naturally filled those compliance positions. But now, when we've got, as we mentioned earlier, ESG, ERM, data privacy, cybersecurity, sanctions, human rights, supply chain, lawyers can't do all of that. So I think naturally that has evolved to a team of people from different skill sets. And then as those people get promoted within the organization, it happens that the head of compliance comes from a different background that isn't legal. It may have also almost happened without the general counsel realizing it. But I would still say, though, that the JD is required in a lot of companies, especially in the US, is what we see. In Europe, they seem to, and this is a generalization, but the data that we have backs that up, is that they're open to other backgrounds more frequently.
Great question from Kelly just popped in, kind of related to this. Do you think there will be more opportunity for people with experience in one compliance/ethics area, for example, the business sector, to switch to another sector such as healthcare or something like that? And if so, how do you increase the odds that you can make that transition quickly or successfully? Is it a function of that candidate being able to frame out appropriately to say, like, hey, this is a good bet? Or are there things like they can put on paper that can really help kind of frame out their potential before they have that meeting?
So I'd say there's two areas that are harder to move into. Let's say you're in a manufacturing company. It's not necessarily easy to move from that into pharmaceutical or banking, financial services. They have more of a sort of closed shop mentality, and they want people that come from pharma background or banking and financial services. Now, I wouldn't say it's an impossible move. What I would look at is, if I was working with a pharmaceutical business, is healthcare compliance and ethics compliance or commercial compliance combined into one department? If so, it can be hard if you're moving from industrial company to move into that space. However, lots of pharmaceutical businesses will split healthcare compliance and have a commercial compliance function, and that skill and that experience will be something that you can bring from another industry. So there are ways to move into, say, pharmaceutical. I think medical devices is easier, but still can be tough to move into. But other industries, I tell my clients to focus less on what industry the candidates come from. And again, as I've said, what compliance experience they have. If they know how to build a program, if they know how to write a policy, if they know how to do compliance training and do investigations and manage a third-party program, and it was done in a chemicals company rather than a manufacturing company, that shouldn't be a showstopper. That skill set will be transferable.
I mean, it's just pattern recognition at some level. And again, to your point, so little, just in the scheme of like what a highly effective compliance person or what a highly effective compliance program is really based on the specific regulations tied to this specific business. Like, you move to a different business, even in that same industry, if it's touching different jurisdictions, there's maybe new regulations that you have to adhere to. Like the thing, like where the rubber meets the road and where the real point of leverage comes is, to your point, like animating that program and applying it and driving new behaviors in the organization. And to the extent that there's human beings in different organizations, like all that is very transferable. So we just have to, like, again, I keep trying to like underscore that, like we have to stamp out whatever limiting beliefs we might have, especially as we're going into the job market, and really try to pick that lock. Have you seen that show Pluribus? This is like the Ethicsverse is like the hive mind. Okay, we have one mind across all of us. Karen asked this question I was just about to ask. Do you see that companies are allowing for remote work for better candidates, or are they really focused on being in the office these days? Are we seeing kind of a shift or a different flexibility around, work from home or like remote work? Or are you seeing kind of the pendulum swing back toward like, nah, I got to have somebody in the office here?
If I'm looking at official company policy, then the trend is towards more days in the office. However, there are exceptions to that. So we track this. Since COVID, we've been looking at how much of the jobs that we've worked on have been fully remote, hybrid, and fully on site. And about 1/4 have been fully remote positions. And then I would say the remaining 3/4 really are hybrid in some capacity. We haven't 1 or 2 positions where it's been 5 days a week on site, but that's a tiny percentage. If we're looking at some more senior compliance positions where teams are going to be structured worldwide and the jurisdictions you're trying to cover are global, whether you're sitting at your desk at home or sitting at a desk at the office shouldn't make a big difference. So on a day-to-day basis, I tell my clients to keep an open mind with regards to that. As long as the person's willing to come to the office and the headquarters to have that face-to-face interaction with stakeholders and travel when required, that's the more important matter, as opposed to whether you're in the office 2 days or 4 days a week, especially if you're working with a regional, international, or global compliance program.
Great. So when you're looking at, you're looking at hundreds of compliance profiles, you're looking at hundreds of resumes, right? Like, are there certain things that make certain candidates immediately stand out as worth pursuing for, more senior or more middle level opportunities? Like, what are the things you're keying in on? And what are some of the things that you're like, when you read it, you're like, this is garbage, I'm throwing it out? We're just being honest here today, okay? There's just a couple of buddies talking. Okay.
Yeah. Even though a couple of buddies talking, I want to reassure people that I'm not throwing anyone's resume in the bin. Especially with how we work. Usually people that we've been introduced to have been recommended to us by someone else that I know. As I mentioned, compliance, it's a well-connected space, and we're usually building our network that way. So we're not usually for a role looking at hundreds of profiles. We're probably looking at a smaller set where we already know that on paper these would be a good fit, and then it's more about going through them and one by one to think about cultural fit and personality fit. Typically, the types of roles that we're working on, or the companies that we work with, the compliance program is going through some sort of transformation. It's a build project. It's, they may have had their program built 5 years ago. They now need to upgrade it, or they've got enforcement actions and needing to, from root take it out from the roots and rebuild. And that's a certain skill set that's required to do that. That's different from those that have managed and maintained existing programs. So we're typically looking for people that are not afraid to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty and build out processes and policies and procedures, as well as being able to take that step back and look at the bigger picture element and look at the direction they're trying to take the program. But they need to be able to switch between both.
Do you sometimes see certain candidates that, maybe you have a couple of positions that you're trying to fill and you see kind of multiple companies kind of not fighting over, but like this person is sort of top of the heap? Like, does that happen ever, where it's kind of like they're like, man, company A and company B are kind of looking at that same person?
I mean, it will happen that, companies are going through an interview process with one candidate and they're going through another interview process with another company. And it can get to a point where one's trying to get to offer stage and the other one's trying to get to the final interview done. And it's a bit of a rush. The way we operate is that sorry, go on. Are you going to add?
Oh, no. Well, so it sounds like, yes, this happens. You're probably not pitting them. You're probably not pitting is what you're going to say. You're not pitting like the same candidate against sort of like similar clients. But like, do you see some commonality with some people who seem to be like hitting their head against the wall? They can't seem to get traction and get an offer. And then other people are able to very quickly get offers from multiple different spots. If that type of archetype exists, what are the commonalities between those types of candidates? Are they just better at connecting their skill set to the situation at the organization? Are they just more personable? Are they just better able to convey their value in a more credible way? Like, what are some of those sort of like common elements that you see across the board?
Part of it is a numbers game. if you're going through an interview process and you're getting down to the final two, it will be, I'm not saying it's a flip of a coin, but there's only so much you can control in that point. So I'm usually telling my candidates that the more important thing is to be in the conversation. If you're going through interview process, you're having conversations, you're being invited to interview, that's the most important thing, because then it does come down to things that are more out of your control. Personality fit, with what the key in the lock analogy that you used earlier. If you're not having the conversations and you're not getting heard, that's where I think you need to really focus on what can I be doing differently. Because ultimately, if a company is hiring a chief compliance officer, they can only take one person, even though there'll be lots of brilliant people that could do it. If you're getting into the final two, final five, the final stages, then it's down to having enough irons in the fire to find the right one. But if you're not having the conversation at all, then it's something worth looking at.
So for the last couple of minutes here, man, I had so many questions. This has been a great episode. Thank you all for adding these questions, and thank you, Jamie, for being so generous with your wisdom and the experience that you're seeing in the market right now. So when how do you think compliance folks should articulate their value prop differently when targeting roles in heavily regulated industries versus, industrial sectors with emerging client needs? How should they think about changing their talk track across these different situations? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think it's.
I would imagine. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. You get it. You get the question.
Well, I get the question. I think there's no. So as I mentioned earlier, some sectors, heavily regulated sectors, it's not easy to just jump into from another sector. However, I mean, if you're going to be in conversation and interviewing in a more heavily regulated sector, I'd probably focus more on compliance program implementation, audit readiness, regulatory risk mitigation. Those sort of topics is what I would probably looking more at the highly regulated industries. When it comes to commercial sectors, probably a little bit more around risk enablement, governance frameworks and building those, embedding ethics into an organization, especially as they're in growth mode, how you embed that in. As a rough rule of thumb, that'd be the split I would do.
Yeah. So, oh man, I had something so smart to say. I'll say it in a second when I remember. So what do you think is the most effective way to communicate career success and impact when your compliance achievements are confidential or difficult to quantify? I've seen this a bunch where they can't talk about what they actually did because it was a deferred prosecution agreement, or they were going through some kind of a thing, or we have just a general sensitivity of not violating an NDA or something like that. How would you advise someone to be able to kind of talk about those things?
Look, I mean, I appreciate there will be a lot of issues like that where you can't get into the details that you want to be able to get into. However, typically, the people that you're also interviewing with have been in similar situations in other organizations, so they understand the limitations of what you can and you can't say in principle. So I would still want to, as always, talk about the situation when you started or when the challenge first came along and how it was resolved at the end, and having a really clear narrative for that as much as you can say, but giving the disclaimer to the person you're speaking with that I can't go into more detail because of X, Y, or Z. They should understand that, especially if you're speaking with a hiring manager or a compliance leader in this space. If it's a HR manager that maybe doesn't know compliance as much, it may require a little bit more education and just explaining as to why you can't do it. But don't be afraid to explain why you can't go into the detail that they will expect if it's HR.
I remember what I was going to say. So I just want to share this technique. I think this is smart, as I alluded to before. But when you're going through an interview, trying to get a new job, that is a sales process. You're trying to sell yourself. And the best thing you can do is stack up that's rights. Okay. I want the person that I'm talking to say that's right a bunch. They're not going to say it out loud. Maybe they will. Yep. But if they can keep saying that's right, that's right, that's right, that's right, those start stacking up, and that starts pushing them from this, this sort of place of questioning, is this person going to be the right fit, to this further down the spectrum towards certainty. And I think what we can do also to affect those that's rights are to do this thing called an objection audit or an accusation audit. So this works particularly well when you're changing industries, where you can pull out what they're probably thinking. You probably think that my background in industrials isn't going to translate that well into healthcare, but blah, 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 blah. Pull that objection out and go ahead and, oh, we're right at time. Okay, so if you can pull that objection out and say what they're thinking sooner, they're going to say that's right a lot faster. Okay, we are right at time. Jamie has a hard stop. Let's give a massive emoji explosion for Jamie. Reach out to him on LinkedIn. Definitely download his guide here, and then there's a new one coming out in a couple of months. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Phenomenal. 7,000 emojis. Okay, that is a phenomenal start to the year. This has been a great topic. Thank you all for the participation. Next Tuesday, innovations webinar. Leave your pocketbook at home. Just kind of see what else is out there. And next Thursday, we're going to be attacking this big thing that we're all dealing with, retaliation, with the one and only Matt Kelly. Hope you all can join us. See you next week. Bye-bye.